Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Caitlin,
I'm Mai.
and this is the Girls After God's Heart podcast. Today we are talking about obsession and idolatry.
Yeah.
Some very prevalent issues. But before we jump into things, I just wanted to put some exciting news out there. Next week we are starting inviting guests onto the podcast. So
Yay.
if you want to be a guest on the podcast and you live in the area, which if you know where we are, then that probably means that you're in contact with us somehow, which is ideal. But yeah, so if you're in the area and you want to be on the podcast, you can find the link to fill out a form to be a guest on the podcast in our Instagram story. So that will be up. We're filming this on Sunday, so that will be up Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and possibly Thursday if I remember to keep it up that long. So yeah, that's some exciting news. We're gonna start getting guests on here, which hopefully will get some new perspectives, new topics. So that'll be really fun. So yeah, let's jump right into it.
So starting off with a Bible verse. This is the verse one of the commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 23. And then you shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Exodus 24.
Claiming to be wise, they became fools, exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, and birds and animals and creeping things. Romans 1:21 through 23. And basically, what this um, Bible quote is saying is we become foolish when we reject God's glory. Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And that's a huge thing, especially in culture nowadays. Is like so many people are chasing after money and being rich, and they think that having more money will solve all their problems, but in reality, like God's the only one who can solve all of your problems, and he's the only one who you can find fulfillment in. Isaiah 44:9 through 11. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant, to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol, which can profit nothing? When we turn to worldly things, we are greatly dishonoring God, and ultimately we gain nothing from that because, again, God is the only thing that can fulfill our needs. And yeah. So we have some examples of idols that are in our lives, or so in our lives. Um, like if you think about culture now, if you're like a teenager or you're like Gen Z, millennials, I guess. Beyond that, like they didn't like grow. I I gotta remember. I don't want to offend anybody, but like especially like Gen Z now, like us and Gen Alpha, we're growing up with like so much technology, and like there's been so many problems of people spending so much time on their phones and so much time on all these electronics, and they're not like looking up and actually having conversations with people. So we really have to think like how much time do we spend on our phones in comparison to the time that we spend with God? Because like people mindlessly scrolling on social media. Like I know I've caught myself in that too. And you have to you really got to pull yourself out of that and be like, "Hey, like I obviously like it's not getting anywhere." There's like that mind block that when you're scrolling through social media, you're not doing anything. You're just like watching things and you just keep going and going and going and eventually you're just like numb to it. And really that's like imagine how much time you could spend doing something else with that. Like you're really not gaining anything from scrolling on social media and stuff like that. So there's that. And then also, oh, I'm sorry, did you want to add something?
Oh, no. You're fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, how do we view celebrities? Because that's such a big thing. It's like we idolize celebrities, and in culture, we're like looking up like Taylor Swift. That's a big thing. And I know my sister's gonna come after me for saying this, which is fine. It's whatever. She knows how I feel about
I
Taylor
feel
Swift.
like you're offending all the Swifties out there.
I'm offending all the Swifties. Guys, if you're a Christian and you're a Swiftie, I can respect you for that. But don't take it to the point where you are idolizing Taylor Swift because again, Taylor Swift is not going to solve all your problems, okay? If you're going through a breakup, go to God, not Taylor Swift. I'm just saying.
You might be like unconsciously idolizing them,
Mm,
and then yeah, you might just not realize that.
sorry, my computer's dying. Um, that was not a computer charger. Okay, we're back. Back to relationships in our lives can be idols. I feel like this very much goes off of like the celebrity thing because, like, for example, if we put so much time into, I think the example that I had in my head when I wrote this was placing your significant other over somebody else. Like Maya and I don't have any experience with this. Okay, I've seen examples where people are like, um, they're putting their significant other before God, and in a relationship, you're supposed to put God before the other person. Again, God is put God first. You're putting God before everything else, and ultimately, that's what makes relationships and just in like general work is like even like our friendships. Like if God is the center of it, then that's what's going to ultimately make our relationship grow and make our relationship better because we can help each other grow because we both have that same foundation of who God is and God has been um working in our lives and we have these experiences that we can help each other with and through that. And so ultimately if God is not the center of your relationship with others, that relationship is not going to be as strong and can basically like harm you and it's just not going to be as beneficial for you as a relationship ultimately with God, and a relationship with God at the center of it will help you grow and help you through that. So my, would
So
you like to give us an example of
So I've had idols in my life. I know it's bad, but I think I was like blindly idolizing these stuff. So I've been um I had obsessions with K-pop. I kind of still do, but it's better. Anime, ballet, and then grades. So like during church service, I used to um be concerned and like worried about my grades so much that I couldn't focus on the service. So having too much obsession was really bad. And also, my old ballet studio used to have rehearsals on a Sabbath day, which we had to rest on that day, but like Sabbath day equals rest day. But I couldn't rest because of the rehearsal that was required. And I ended up having injuries, so I learned to not like prioritize my obsession over God.
I think the grade one is very relatable to I know a lot of our like listeners or viewers are our age. So grades are a huge thing for a lot of us that it ends up overwhelming us and we end up um being obsessed with like how well are we doing, like our grades and stuff. And I'm not saying grades don't matter. Grades do matter and are definitely like, you know, they help you get places and obviously like college if you want to get into a good college, get a good career, you have to have like good grades. And I'm saying like, like don't underestimate hard work. Hard work is very important. But when it gets to the point that grades are all that you're thinking about, like you were saying, grades are overtaking, like that's all you're thinking about during like church service or something like that. Even me, I used to like prioritize and be so like obsessed with trying to get like straight A's and perfect. And the thing is, when I first got my first like bad grade, like bad to me, obviously, it's like you realize eventually that in the grand scheme of things, like your grades don't matter as much as you think that they do. And again, I'm not saying that grades aren't important, they are. But in the grand scheme of things, 1B on a test is not going to be detrimental and world ending. Um, so, yeah.
Everything will be worthless when you go to heaven.
Yeah, again, don't store up your physical possessions here on earth when you're not going to be able to take them with you.
Yeah, and I used to like be really tired mentally because I kept checking my grades. No, I struggled not to check my grades like during service and stuff.
Mm.
I was like always tired.
I remember freshman year, I was so obsessed with checking my grades. I would check it like 2, 3 times every day. And every time during seminar, they would always say to us, don't check your grades more than once a day. And I like did not do that, but I've gotten better at it now. I maybe check my grades like every other day.
Same here.
It's actually been a lot less. Sometimes I forget about it. So, yeah. Um so are we ready to move on to example?
Yeah.
Okay. So, examples of idols in the Bible. So, probably the biggest one that you would think of when you think of examples of idols within the Bible is Exodus 32, which is the golden calf. So, I'm going to read that or a section of that and then we'll talk about that. So, Exodus 32. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountains, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day, people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in the revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people whom you brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.'" So basically, the Israelites made a golden calf to worship, and through worshiping this golden calf, they became corrupt, and arguments and unsettlement then arose within the community. And that the big thing is that after giving these people the Ten Commandments, they completely ignored them as soon as they felt leadership leave, they immediately turned and went straight back to what they were doing. They went straight back to the corruptness, the arguments, the unsettlement, the life without God, and they forgot what God had done for them. And that's so like relevant to everything that we do today is when we go through a hard times and we forget that God is there, sometimes we can go running back to the habits or the things that we used to do, and we forget that like God was the one who brought us out of our last trial. And it's like a loop and like a cycle. We just keep going back to the things that we do, and then we come back to God and we run. And the thing is, we have to remember God is with us always. And so when we realize that and we go into a situation with God with us, then we know we're not going to run back to that. We're not going to run back to those sins, and we're going to keep going ahead with the mindset God is with us, and that putting God first in everything is going to help us get through those trials. Okay, did we cover the Sabbath day basically, or do you want to talk about that?
So there's a commandment that talks about the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Exodus 28. Caitlin said before we started this podcast that our churches like began to stop prioritizing the rest day, and people started prioritizing the other things than like keeping it holy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that goes back to like what you were saying about Sabbath day and your example of how idols can like make you stray from the Ten Commandments and make you stray from the things that God has been trying to guide you to do. So, moving on, we've got some questions to basically ask yourself about things that you may be idolizing in your life. And the thing is, if God were to take it away from you, would you be okay with it? And if not, then that might be an idol that you're putting above God. Because we realize everything on this earth is temporary. And so if God has the power to take away anything from us. Anything that he's the God who gives and the God who takes away. And so if God took something away from us, like if God took away our phones, this relationship, these movies, this access to all these other things that we do, like if God took away social media, would you be okay with it? Still, would it affect your life detrimentally? Because then that opens up your eyes to see if this affects you so detrimentally that you think that you will not be able to function without it, then you've got to like reset your mind and think about like, am I actually putting God first? Or am I putting this other thing first?
To what extent could you admire? So I believe that if you, mm, I don't think, it's hard to explain. Um, so having role models in your life is good. So for example, like having a pastor as your role model is good. Like having ideal Christian lifestyle, like trying to copy his lifestyle. But if you're like idolizing your pastor, that'll be like a problem.
I think I just want to say one thing that you said is if you're copying his lifestyle, and I think copying someone's lifestyle is just a little bit to the point where it becomes idolatry, because ultimately God has your own life planned out for you, and everybody's at their own different stages of life and their own different stages of faith. And so I think that everybody's life is going to look different from the next person's, because what God has in store for them is different, and also the things that they're learning, they're at different stages as everybody else. And that's why we really can't judge other people who are in different stages of faith than us, because ultimately they're still growing and they're still chasing after the same God. We're all part of the same family, and we're meant to encourage each other, because ultimately we want, oh my goodness, I use the word ultimately so much. This is actually a problem. I mean, it's better than saying but I still, okay, forgive me. Um but basically we're meant to build each other up and to help each other grow in the faith. So all of our lives are going to look different, but that's just the part of growing, and that's the part of, well, no, I'm not gonna say it. That's the part of just being a part of this family and being a part of God's family, is that God's gonna guide you in different directions, and we really can't, judge others for having a different lifestyle than us.
And your role models and the people you admire, they can still have mistakes. So you can't like copy their
Mhm.
lifestyle.
That's why reading God's word and reading the Bible is so important, because this is literally God speaking. And so you base your life off of other people. Other people are going to get it wrong sometimes. But if you base your life off of the word, God's going to guide you in the right direction. Okay, so lastly, we're going to talk about taking steps to combat idolatry. So the first step is pointing it out and taking accountability for the idols in your life. What things are you putting above God? And you have to be honest with yourself, because the only way that you're going to grow is to find those areas that you can improve in.
Yeah, like I said before, those celebrities are and like those idols are just like us. So like don't be obsessed with them.
They make mistakes too, so not everything is going to be perfect. And Jesus did not make mistakes, and Jesus led a perfect life, and so that is the life that we should look to follow, not other people. And then seeing the worth of Jesus, because we tend to idolize things because we're seeking something in that thing that we're idolizing that can only be found in God. So, like love, acceptance, things like that. We're looking for those things in these idols that are not going to be able to satisfy us. So we have to recognize that Jesus is greater than everything else and that he's the only one that can satisfy our needs.
And then ask to God, like pray to God that he'll like help your addiction to these idolatry.
And yeah, making sure that you're in your word, because that's going to be what will guide you through each thing. And if you're in your word and you're putting God first, ultimately,
Mhm.
these idols are going to um, they're going to go away if you focus your eyes on the Lord. Well, that's a terrible outro. Well, that is all for today, guys. We hope that you got something out of this episode, and we'll see you back next week with our guest. Bye.
Bye.